Welcome everyone to this IT at Cork briefing session on the Horizon Europe programme, which we've organised today with the support of Enterprise Ireland and our panellists. Just to give you some background, in IT at Cork, we've been working over the last while to build relations and connect with other technology and innovation clusters across Europe and beyond. And as part of this, we are looking at the different European funding opportunities, and we want to introduce these opportunities to our members. So to this end, we've been collaborating with Stephen O'Reilly from Enterprise Ireland, who's the national contact point for Horizon Europe, in order to bring you today's session. Our MC today is Jenny Patterson from Cygnus Solutions, and our panellists include Stephen O'Reilly from Enterprise Ireland, Ger Hallisey from Dell, Jorgis Vega of Tyndall, Hilary Cronin from Metabolomic Diagnostics, and Gerald Fitzgerald from Ervia. I'd like to thank Jenny and all the panellists for their support and for their time today. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end of the session, and please feel free to use the Q&A facility. I'll now hand over to Jenny, who will introduce the panellists and MC the session. Thank you, Jenny.
Well, thank you, Juliet, for such a lovely introduction, and thanks also to you and all at IT at Cork for inviting me here today. Now, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone joining today's Horizon Europe briefing session. And just by way of a little bit of background before we get into the presentations, since the early 80s, research and innovation activities in the EU have been bundled together in a single program called a framework program. And the first framework program was focused on IT, which is of interest to everyone here. Now, today the programs are much broader technologically, and they're conceived for a period of between 5 and 7 years. And as time goes on, these programs get more so we're going to see and hear a little bit more about that today in terms of what's going to happen in the latest frame program. Now, the EU's research policy, it first appeared in the 1950s through the European Coal and Steel Community. So the programs always mirror what's going on in the background economically, but even now more so what's going on from a societal course. We can all and important technology and research and innovation through the recent advances in COVID-19 vaccines, and how important and vital. So it's more important than ever get behind these kind of programs. Now, Horizon Europe, by its very name, gives us a sense of a future with immense optimism, possibility, and opportunity. You are very welcome to ask questions throughout the web Q&A function, as Juliet mentioned, on the platform. And we'll also be conducting polls throughout the session this morning, so watch out for them. Now, we have a very exciting webinar, and the format will be firstly to have an overview presentation from Stephen, and then we will go into shorter presentations based on people's experience, and that will come through from four panelists that we have lined up. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Stephen O'Reilly. Stephen is a national delegate and contact point for Horizon 2020 and now Horizon Europe in ICT and future emerging technologies, and he works for Enterprise Ireland. He's part of an overall national support network, which is there to help us navigate our way through these framework programs. And I have to say how immensely helpful that group is to us in Ireland. It's certainly something that is not available everywhere in other EU countries, and I've direct experience of that. So we're very, very, take it away, please.
Hi, thank you, Jenny, for that warm introduction, and good morning, everybody. I'd just like to start by thanking IT at Cork, and in particular Juliet, for putting this session together and inviting me to come along and give a brief overview of Horizon Europe. So can you all see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So put into presentation mode. So I'm going to take about 20 to 25 minutes this morning just to give you a brief introduction to Horizon Europe. You'll see on this first slide here my contact details, my email address and mobile number. So if anybody wants to follow up at any stage after this, please feel free to get in touch with me at any stage. If I'm not able to help you, if your question relates to a different part of the program, I'll be able to put you in touch with the relevant person on the National Support Network that will be looking after Horizon Europe from an Irish perspective. So first of all, before we dive into Horizon Europe, I just want to take a few minutes to have a quick recap of the previous framework program, Horizon 2020, which is just coming to an end. So Horizon 2020 ran from 2014 until 2020, but it's not quite finished yet. The last calls in this program have only just recently finished. The last deadlines have only just recently passed. So, you know, there's still money to be decided in terms of projects from that. The program itself, it has been quite successful from an Irish perspective. Irish researchers and companies have secured in excess of €1 billion from Horizon 2020, and that equates to about 1.75% of the total available budget. And that's a figure that we would be very happy with from a national perspective. The graph here, I don't expect you to be able to read all the different parts of it, but it's basically taken from the Funding and Tenders portal, which is the Commission's main website for the programme. And it basically shows the different parts of the programme where Irish participants have been successful. And the most successful part is the Mary Sklodowski-Curie actions, where Irish participants have won more than 180 million. And then second to that is the ICT area, where we're coming in at just over 140 million in funding over the 7-year period. In terms of the successful participants, I've just put in 2 tables here. The first table on the left is the top participants in Ireland from an academic perspective, and then on the right we have the top companies. So you can see there Trinity College is out in front with just over 135 million in funding for the programme. And as I say, look, all of these figures potentially can still rise because the final evaluations for the programme have not yet been completed. So you can see Trinity up in front, followed by UCC and UCD. Okay, and interestingly enough, we have Waterford Institute of Technology, the top ranked IoT in the programme from an Irish perspective. Company-wise, we have IBM up in front, a very successful participant within the programme, just over 20 million in funding. Glanbia coming in with 15 million, and so on. And what's interesting here as well is that in this top 10, you can see we've got a number of SMEs in here. We've got Sirius, Era Composites, Radisense, Crevalve, IES, and AquaTT. So we have 6 SMEs in the top 10 in terms of company involvement. Looking more specifically at the ICT part of the programme, and again, this has been an area where Irish participants have been very successful. Over 350 individual participations in 251 projects. As I mentioned earlier, just over 140 million in funding has been secured, and this equates to 2.1% of the available ICT budget. And that actually is a significant increase on our take in terms of the previous framework program, FP7, okay, where our take was in or around 1.6%. Again, for information, I've just put in the 2 tables here, our top academic participants and our top companies. In this case, UCC is by far our most successful academic organisation. And the vast majority of those 54 projects that you see there and the 28 million has actually been won by the Tyndall National Institute, who you'll hear from later on this morning. Okay, Galway are coming in at second with 23 projects, and again, an Institute of Technology, WIT, coming in third, okay, with 14 projects. In terms of companies, again, obviously IBM is out in front with 16 projects. Intel is in there. In terms of other large companies, we've got Dell EMC, who you'll hear from later on this morning. We've got United Technologies, or Raytheon, as they go by now. We've got Ericsson. But again, you will see a number of SMEs in there. So F6S, Red Zinc, Accionista, Sirius, and Soapbox Lab, all SMEs that have been successful within the program. Now, all of that information that I've just given you in the last couple of slides, it's readily available on the Funding and Tenders portal. As I said, the link is here. It's all public information. It's a very useful tool, this Funding and Tenders portal. You can go in and see what countries are doing within the program. You can look at particular organizations. You can look at particular topics. So, for example, if you're interested in artificial intelligence or big data or whatever, you can focus in on the topics that have been supported and the projects that have been funded within those areas and see who's involved. So it really is a very, very useful tool if you're looking at getting involved. I'm more than happy to sit down and talk anybody through it. It does take a little bit of time to get to know the tool and to find your way around it, but as I say, I'm more than happy to assist anyone who wants to have a look at it in more detail. So moving on, the Horizon Europe program is going to be launched this year. It hasn't actually been legally formally launched as of yet, but that will happen very shortly. So the program will run from 2021 until 2027, and the budget that's earmarked for the program is 95 billion. It sounds like an awful lot of money, but by the time you dive down into all the different areas, you'll soon see that it's, you know, it's a very competitive program, and there will be a lot of unsuccessful proposals in this program. But hopefully, you know, by engaging with the National Support Network, we'll be able to help navigate you through the program and hopefully improve your chances of success. The main objectives of the program, and again, these are coming from the Commission at a political level. So we've three main objectives, and they are to strengthen the EU scientific and technological basis, to boost Europe's innovation capacity, competitiveness and jobs, and finally to deliver on citizens' priorities and sustain our socio-economic model and values. The program itself is illustrated here. Here we have the structure of it. We have three main pillars: excellent science, global challenges and European industrial competitiveness, and then pillar 3, innovative Europe. In terms of budget, pillar 1 has a budget of in the region of 25 billion. And you'll see the three different parts here: the European Research Council, which funds individual investigators and researchers. We've got the Marie Curie actions, which is really focused in on the mobility and career progression of researchers. And finally, we have an area on research infrastructures. In pillar 2, global challenges in European industrial competitiveness, we have 6 different clusters. You can see them listed out here: health, culture, creativity and inclusive society, security, digital industry and space, where the bulk of the ICT opportunities will reside. We've got an area in climate, energy and mobility, and then finally food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and environment. Now, pillar 2 has an overall budget in the region of 54 billion. And of that, just over 15 billion is going to the digital industry and space piece, which I will talk a little bit more about in the next slides. And then pillar 3, the main area within pillar 3 is the European Innovation Council. You may have heard of the SME instrument. So this now resides within the European Innovation Council and is known as the Eic Accelerator. For anyone who was familiar with the previous Future and Emerging Technologies program, this also resides within the European Innovation Council and is known now as the Eic Pathfinder. Down at the bottom here, the horizontal action that you can see is widening participation and strengthening the European research area. That has a budget in the region of 3.5 billion, and the main focus there is on trying to increase the participation and success rates for countries that are not very active in the program already. Okay, mainly focusing on the Eastern European countries. So to focus a little bit more on pillar 2, again, as I say, we have our 6 different clusters within this pillar. I'm mainly going to focus on cluster 4, which is the digital industry and space. Okay. Now, each of these clusters will have their own work programs, and each work program will be divided into a number of what they're calling destinations. Okay, so this is a new term that the Commission has introduced in this new framework program, and these destinations are basically coherent packages of calls and topics. Okay, I've just put in some more information here around explaining what the destinations are. So as I said, it's a coherent package of calls and topics aimed at contributing to the expected impacts which are set out in the European Commission strategic plan. The destinations will provide the policy narrative for the calls and topics that will be included in the work programme, and they'll also describe the long-term socio-economic needs and problems where ordinary investments would be required to play a role. Okay, and it's important that you look at the background information around these destinations, because when you submit your proposal and ultimately win a project, you don't just address the expected outcomes of the actual topic that you're applying to. You also have to address the expected outcomes of the destination itself. Okay. Another thing I want to mention before I get into the destinations for cluster 4 are partnerships. There's a large number of partnerships related to Horizon Europe. We've got between 40 and 50 partnerships, and they divide into 3 different types. Okay, so first and foremost, we have co-programmed European partnerships. These are partnerships between the Commission and public and private partners. These partnerships will have a memorandum of understanding, and basically they will lead to topics being included in the mainstream Horizon Europe work programs. We also have co-funded European partnerships. An example of this would be the co-fund part of the Marie Curie program, which I'll mention a little later. And also Aeronets would be an example of this. So it's basically where the Commission will co-fund activities with other public bodies. And then finally, we've got the institutionalized partnerships. So these are partnerships that are basically given a legal identity. They're set up in their own right, and they will run their own calls and projects. So all of these partnerships will have what are known as strategic research and innovation agendas, and that's basically the topics that are called for, be it within the mainstream work programs or in the institutionalized partnerships work programs. The topics in there will focus on these strategic research agendas. So within cluster 4, digital industry and space, there are actually 10 of these partnerships. 5 of those will be ICT related, and you can see them all here. So the first 3 are what are known as institutionalized partnerships. They will be running their own calls in due course, and they'll be expected to get up and running probably in Q3 of this year. So the first 3 that we have there: high performance computing, key digital technologies, smart networks and services. As I say, they will be launched later on this year. We have 2 more ICT related partnerships within cluster 4. We've got AI, data and robotics, and we've got a partnership on photonics as well. Each of these partnerships have associations behind them, and it's possible to go and become a member of these associations. They can be very useful for networking. They can be very useful for getting involved and having a say in the strategic research and innovation agendas going forward. So going back to destination 4, digital industry and space, as I mentioned, we have 6 different destinations within cluster 4. The very first one, destination 1, is very much focused on manufacturing. Destination 2 is very much focused on materials. And then 3, 4, and 6 are kind of ICT heavy, really. They're the main ICT opportunities within the program. And destination 5 then is focused in on space. I have one slide on each of the destinations. I'm going to concentrate on the ICT ones, given the audience that we have here today. But as I say, for completeness, I've just included all 6 destinations here within the presentation. As I say, destination 1, climate neutral, circular and digitalized production, very much focused in on manufacturing topics. And each one of the orientations that we can see here will have a suite of topics within the work program. Okay, so you'll see things like digital tools popping up there, digital tools for manufacturing, AI for manufacturing, 5G for manufacturing, topics like that will appear in the work program. Destination 2, digitized, resource efficient and resilient industry, is very much a materials focused destination, looking at raw materials, looking at green and sustainable materials and so on. Now, destination 3 is the first of the ICT focused destinations, and this really is looking at world leading data and computing technologies. It's broken down into 3 areas. We've got data sharing, we've got data analytics, and then we have an area on cloud to edge to IoT. And again, within the work program, we will have a number of topics within each of these 3 areas. Destination 4 is quite a large destination, and it's the main ICT destination, digital and emerging technologies for competitiveness and fit for the Green Deal. You can see the type of areas that are cropping up here. So we've got ultra low power processors, we've got electronics, we've got photonics, we've got an area on 6G, innovation in AI data and robotics. We've got an area focusing in on key emerging enabling technologies such as spintronics and biointelligent manufacturing and so on. We've got an area focused in on graphene, and we also have an area on quantum technologies. Now, within this particular destination, the 3 institutionalized partnerships that I mentioned also come into play. So the high performance computing, the smart networks and services, and the key digital technology partnerships will all have their own separate work programs and separate list of topics which will be called for later on in the year. Destination 5 is the space focused destination. And I won't dwell on that. I'll move straight on to destination 6, which is the final destination within digital industry and space. Destination 6 focuses in on a human-centered and ethical development of digital and industrial technologies. It's got areas like leadership in artificial intelligence based on trust, trustworthy internet. It's got an area on extended reality. And finally, systemic approaches to make the most of technologies within society and industry, where we have topics around intellectual property, we've got topics on standardization, we have topics looking at future skills, and also STARTS, which is the combination of science, technology, and the arts. Okay. Destination 3, I just have one slide that I want to mention. Cluster 3, civil security for society, because again there will be some significant ICT opportunities within here. The budget for cluster 3 as a whole is 1.6 billion. And you can see the main focus areas here on this slide. In particular, I just want to point out the digital security piece. So there'll be a lot of opportunities there around cyber security and so on. Michael Murphy is the contact here, and you can see his details here. So feel free to follow up with Michael if you're interested in this area. The Marie Sklodowsky Curie actions. This is in the excellent science pillar, and I mentioned it earlier on in my overview slide. A budget of 6.4 billion. It's basically a bottom-up area, funds all areas of research, and it's very much focused in on the career progression and the development and mobility of researchers. Okay, now companies can participate in this program, so you can have researchers placed within your company, but you must show and demonstrate that you have the sufficient infrastructure and supervisory capacity within the company in order to participate. There are 4 main areas within the Marie Curie part of the program. The first one is Doctoral Networks. And here, it focuses in on the training of PhD students. And within this area, a company could actually have a PhD student on secondment within the company. Staff exchange does what it says on the tin. It's about staff exchange between different companies and different academic institutes. With all of these Marie Curie programs, cross-border mobility is a requirement. Okay, so again, as I say, it really is about career progression of researchers and mobility of researchers. The postdoctoral fellowships focuses in on more experienced researchers who already have a PhD. And again, companies and academic institutions can participate within this. And then finally, we have the co-fund part of the program. And this will be where the European Commission will co-fund along with other agencies, things like fellowships and so on. Okay. Now, the Irish University Association is the main point of contact for the Marie Curie program. And the website is given here on this slide. Okay. European Innovation Council is something that will also be of interest to companies. This really is broken down into two main areas, as I mentioned earlier. We've got Pathfinder and we've got Accelerator. Pathfinder is what was the old Future and Emerging Technologies, which focused in on very, very early stage research. So those of you that are familiar with the technology readiness level scale, Pathfinder is really focusing in at the bottom steps on that scale. So you're starting off at TRL1 and targeting to get up to maybe TRL2 or 3 within FET Open or FET Proactive, as it was called. So as I said, this has now been brought in under the umbrella of Pathfinder. There's also a part of Pathfinder called transition activities. And that basically focuses in on getting you from TRL2 or 3 up to maybe TRL5 or 6. Okay. Now the accelerator piece, this is what was known as the old SME instrument in the past. Okay, so the accelerator piece is only for companies. Traditionally, previously it was only for SMEs, but they've extended that a bit now to include mid-caps as well. So, so that's companies with up to 500 staff. Okay, the opportunities here, you can go for a grant only or for a blended finance opportunity. And the blended finance is a combination of grant and equity. And the last area I want to mention within the program is the widening area. And the reason I mention this is that some of you may have collaborators and contacts in some of the countries that are open for widening. So there's opportunities here to get involved. Now, all of these projects in the widening part of the program must be led by the weaker countries, but the stronger countries such as Ireland can also participate in collaboration with these weaker countries. The budget is in the region of 3.5 billion for the programme, and Gráinne Ryan in our Brussels office is the main contact for this. I should say, in terms of timing, all of the work programmes are currently under development. We have drafts of work programmes for all the different areas within the programme. It's expected that those work programmes will be finalised and published in April of this year, and that the first calls will also be opened in April, with deadlines probably in July, August, September timeframe. And again, as with Horizon 2020, we will have 2-year work programmes for the most part. I just want to focus in very quickly before I finish up on opportunities for SMEs. SMEs in Horizon 2020, from an Irish perspective, have been particularly successful, and we would hope that this will continue in the new programme. There's opportunities for SMEs and now mid-caps as well to get involved individually and to put in proposals for projects on their own. And the main area for this, as I just mentioned, is the Eic Accelerator. The funding within this part of the programme is 70% grant aided, and as I mentioned, there's also the opportunity of getting some equity in there as well. For the most part, it's a bottom-up part of the program, although I believe there will be some new top-down areas introduced in Horizon Europe. The other opportunity for companies is to do something collaboratively, and that can be with other companies, it can be with other SMEs, other large industry partners, or other academic partners within the program. Now, when the Commission talks about doing something collaboratively, what they really mean, the minimum eligibility criteria there is to have 3 independent partners in 3 different member states or associated countries. And typically you're going into maybe a 3-year project, which will either be 70% or 100% funded. The collaborative opportunities are generally top-down. Okay, so there's generally particular topics that you are applying to. And just in terms of the funding piece, I've shown the different instruments here in reference to the technology readiness level scale. And this is particularly for companies. Academic groups will be 100% funded in everything within the program. But for companies, we have a research and innovation action, which focuses in at the lower TRL levels, typically TRL 1 to TRL 6. Companies will receive 100% funding within this instrument. And then for the higher TRL levels, we've got innovation actions where companies will be 70% funded within projects. Okay. Now, there are some discussions going on currently about the innovation actions that are linked to partnerships, and in some cases this funding rate may be reduced to 60%. We don't have final clarity on that as of yet, but I'm sure that will all become clear in due course. And finally, I've just shown on the schematic here as well where the equity piece fits in. So that's basically for companies that have reached TRL 8 and don't have the financial capacity to go from TRL 8 up to TRL 9. Okay, so I think that is about it. Yes, it's just my final slide with my contact details again. So as I say, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to follow up with me. And I can also put you in touch with all of the relevant people within the support network. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. You've reached your own destination. What an informative presentation, and just lifting the veil of confusion and so on around this program. Very informative. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Now, Jürgen Fagas is our next speaker, and he is head of EU programs in Tyndall. Now, as we've just heard, Tyndall is doing so well with the EU, in no small part due to the direction of Jürgen. Jürgen is also a contributor to the overall strategy for Tyndall, and he participates in policy and strategic research agendas for EU research and innovation. Please take the stage, Jürgen.
Thank you, Jenny. I hope you can hear me all right and you can see the slide.
Perfect.
Very good. So thanks, Jenny, again for this kind introduction, and thanks, Julian and Vivian, for putting this in place. I think it's very important for the region in particular to bring us all together and collaborate even more and become stronger in terms of partnerships in Europe. Now, I assume that most people have heard Tyndall National Institute by this stage, but just in case I have a short introduction. We are the flagship research institute of UCC, and we operate nationally with a global reach. The reason we can actually do that is based on our critical mass. We have 600 people on site, and over 250,000 investment in infrastructure, and this is still growing. What we do is to deliver deep tech innovation from materials, devices, and also systems and hardware to enable the sustainable digital transition of our economy and also of our society as a whole in the future. Now, having said that, and I think both Stephen and Jenny mentioned our success in Europe. I have to say, 80 to 90% of what we are actually do is based on research contracts. So our funding and our business is fueled by research contracts, and a big part of that is coming from Euro. Around 25% of our total revenue is coming from Europe. So annually we put around 50 proposals. I submit 50 proposals, and out of those 50 proposals, typically 1 in 3 is successful, and this is much higher than actually the European average, and double the average in Ireland in terms of retention rate. As a total, we have brought in the previous framework program around 60 million euros for investment to Tyndall, and overall, because of our national remit and also the remit to work closely with the industry and translate excellent research to innovation, we have been able to secure with our partners in Ireland another 50 million or over 50 million, of which 20 million has gone to the Irish-based industry. So overall, our EU activity accounts for around 10%, slightly larger than 10% of the total drawdown in Ireland that Steve mentioned in the previous talk. So in terms of, we account for 60% of UCC's drawdown, and we are particularly strong in the ICT area, accounting for over 90% of UCC's drawdown. And we are actually I was just looking at the funders and tenders portal that Steve mentioned a little bit earlier yesterday, and I looked at the UCC's position in as a research organization across Europe. It's actually second in across Europe in terms of funding in the ICT domain, which is a significant achievement, I think, for our region. Now, I mentioned the translation of research excellence to products and how we work very closely with industry. So we have it on our own roadmap to work and bring into our consortium SMEs and multinationals. So this is the breakdown of the companies that we have been partnering with in the last 7 years in Horizon 2020. You see a good spread between technology companies and also application-related companies in the various areas that we can bring digital technologies to apply. For example, in the agri-food sector, in the medical technology sector, and also in the energy and the environment. Now, why? I mean, this is a call to action for Horizon Europe, essentially. So one has to ask the question, okay, so why bother? Why get involved? We've done this before, or we haven't done it. So if we haven't done this before and we didn't succeed, or we were not so happy, why do it again? Or if we haven't been involved, why start? There are 3 main reasons. So the first one is really to attract and grow talent. Look at the resources, human capital within a company. Another is to realize the innovation ideas for products and services. And once those ideas are getting off the ground, find the commercialization routes or paths to bring them into the market. And the EU funding actually allows to do all this, and it is subsidized by the European Union, essentially all these 3 areas. So in terms of attracting growing talent, one can look at the access to people across all career stages, and Steve mentioned the Marie Sklodowska Curie actions as an example. but also people can look at developing in-house expertise and upskill staff. So the exchange programs or the other programs that Steve mentioned in the previous presentation. In terms of realizing the ideas, there is financing for internal R&D, but also strengthening the internal R&D, because one can have access to external science and technology experts like ourselves, and also access to infrastructure and platform technologies. At International Institute, for example, we have state-of-the-art equipment that can be accessed to fabricate, devise, or characterize and test hardware. And also we have platform technologies, and platform technologies not only us, but across Europe can be accessed to build on and develop products and services. Then in terms of commercialization, again, one can finance commercialization activities. The SME instrument or the accelerator, the Eic Accelerator, was mentioned earlier, but also in the other programs, one can fund these commercialization activities, pay for patents as an example. And then something that is typically taken a little bit unnoticed is the marketing that one can do by participating in these large projects and international reach. So the networks actually that are formed are quite important for the internationalization of the final end product. Now, this is what I say, but here is what other people are saying from various testimonials that we have gathered throughout the years. So PMD Solutions, for example, they do mention the expert input, the state-of-the-art know-how, and also how we engaged with them to structure and develop, help them to develop around the core product. In fact, what Miles doesn't say there is how we help them to develop their SME proposal around the core product, which was over €4 million in value. The Renew group, they mention the knowledge and the infrastructure and people. Then strong partnerships is something that I emphasized before. It is beneficial to work between organizations to work, because some problems, they are better understood by one company, and some other problems, for example, in this case, information and communication technologies, are understood by another member of the partnership in these multi-partner projects. And then financing. So you can finance the internal R&D. You can improve the productivity by accessing the other people's expertise, and eventually reduce the cost of translating innovation into actual technology. And this is emphasized here by John Thompson of Origin Medical. In terms of, I'm not going to pick up to just discuss a lot about the details of projects, but I said I'll pick up a few examples of use cases where we work with companies, and it just happened by accident that they're actually all from an institutionalized partnership that Steve mentioned before. So in this project called Microprints, we work with Accelerator. This is it used to be a US SME that found a way to establish actually in Ireland and grow their base from here. And in this project, a pilot line for microtransfer printing was established, which now has led to a manufacturing line for fast prototyping, and is going to be ready for commercial use over the next couple of years. In another case, we worked, and these are 2 use cases, 2 and 3 are projects that they are just about to start. They are in a negotiation phase. In this case, we have Netfasa, which is a company involved in the logistics space. And through this project, they have access to over 30 partners in Europe that work in several use cases in the logistics area, and to move product across the supply chain. This is a huge opportunity for them to internationalize. In another project that is about to start, we work with Dalo. This is a high performance startup company supported by Enterprise Ireland, together with Analog Devices, on a technology that we have been developing throughout the years ourselves, platform technologies based on wearables and human-computer interfaces for Industry 4.0. And this is, again, a huge opportunity for a machine learning company like Dalo to work with Analog Devices and to have their expertise recognized in a real case scenario. Some take-home messages in terms of okay, what we've learned and what we've seen, and what to consider if you're planning to get engaged with Horizon Europe. First point: EU funding is not a revenue stream. It's not something to build a business model around. Even for us, that our at Tyndall, where research is our business. The way we view EU funding is around strategic core platforms, is not for just financing our people from one project to the other and just get on with it. Also, be prepared for long lead times from the time you decide to get engaged to actual having the funding approved and get the first cash in the bank. Especially if you're an SME, this can take a long time. So cash flow may be an issue that one needs to consider. Be selective with the partners. Network, but then choose and work with those who know what they are doing. And also reach out to your friendly national contact point like Stephen O'Reilly. Sharpen your objective to align with the right call. So, and when I'm talking about sharpening the objective, is both in terms of alignment with the business strategy and also the idea. The better defined what the objective is, what you want to get out, is it about talent, is it about innovation, is it about commercialization, then the most appropriate, the better, you can improve the discussion you can have with the national contact point and with the partners to identify what the right goal is. And of course, the idea. Then start early and allow for these discussions to happen. And if something doesn't look to be promising, be ready to drop the bad idea. It's not submission. Is not. It's just a means to an end, and one should take should consider about failing early. Now, if on the other hand you go ahead and you develop a proposal and you submit and still don't succeed, what I always say is there is no failed proposal, and the reason is you can reuse that in another context. In fact, some of these use cases I mentioned here, they are based on previous unsuccessful proposals, national, but we have also EU proposals that we have looked at them and learned and in the end having been successful. That's all I have for you. Thanks for your attention. Here are my contact details in case you would like to reach out. The key message is we want to partner. We're looking for partners in Horizon Europe, especially from Irish-based industry. So we would be happy to discuss any ideas that you have and go forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jurgis. And there you hear it, folks. Tyndall are looking for partners. And I mean, what a wonderful opportunity for SMEs to work with Tyndall. Not only do you get access to technology and know-how, but also their expertise in navigating through these EU proposals. Fantastic success story, Jurgis. Thank you very much. Now, before we move on, I'd just like to give people a reminder that the Q&A function is there. Some questions have been coming in and they've been answered. So please just remember it's there and your questions are welcome. Now we come to some companies, and I'd like to introduce Gerald Fitzgerald from Ervia. He is the commercial manager for the CCS project there. Gerald has a strong background in the energy industry. Gerald, please tell us about your experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm not too sure how familiar people on this call may be with Ervia. This is very much on the IT side, and we're very much on the infrastructure side. So Ervia is the parent company of Gas Networks Ireland, Irish Water, and also a small telecoms company called Aurora Telecom. And we have about over 1,500 people working in Ireland, and we have over 1.7 million customers for gas, water, and wholesale broadband customers as well. And to give you an indication of kind of the scale that we're at, we have a revenue, our benchmark year was 2015, of about 1.3 billion. So very different than some of the people on here, but we are involved in a lot of EU funding projects. Predominantly they are consortiums of a mixture of other utilities, a mixture of SMEs, research organizations, and also some NGOs as well. And I sit in Ervia and I look after decarbonized gases, such as hydrogen, biogas. We work also on predominantly I work on CCS, which is carbon capture and storage, and we've submitted a number of applications under this topic. So Ervia, GNI and Irish Water have all applied for EU funding, predominantly independently though. We haven't done a joint application. And in terms of the Ervia projects, they're the ones that I've managed over the last 2 years. And to give you a flavour of some of them which we've applied for, we've applied for Horizon 2020 funding for Realise and Route DFS, and we've also applied for funding under the Connecting Europe Facility Programme, which is a little bit different than Horizon 2020. It's mainly for infrastructure projects, but the approach and the lessons learned from them, which I'll cover in a moment, are very, very similar. So to give you a first idea of a successful project we're involved in at the moment is the Realise project. It's funded by Horizon 2020, and it looks at the increase of the TRL level for a carbon capture unit. And we are going to demonstrate this unit at the Irish Refinery in Cork this year. So it was a project which was led by Syntef, which are a very large European Norwegian-based research organisation, and we've had a number of different Irish partners, predominantly ourselves, but we also brought in UCC, ESB, Borgash Energy to assist us with the application, and also they're involved heavily in the project as well. And the overall objective is to cut down the cost of implementing this technology in terms of capex cost, and also reduce the operation cost, and to increase the TRL level, but also the societal readiness index level for the project. Another project we're involved in is around studies around the transportation of CO2. So if we had to build a CO2 transportation network, it would be quite similar to a natural gas transportation network, but there will be some fundamental differences as we manage that gas. So we've got funding, which we just signed the grant agreement for yesterday, to undertake studies for the next 2 years to look at what a cluster of carbon capture units in the Cork Harbour and in the Dublin Harbour area would look like, and how we could load it onto ships or for export or potentially store it in the now depleted Kinsehead gas field. So this is funded by the Connecting Europe Facility Fund, which is a 50% funded program, and we are the lead applicant in this application. And for this application, we're actually the sole applicant, which is predominantly the way the CEF fund is administered. We've been involved in a number of applications which we're unsuccessful in as well. I suppose that's really when you learn the most about how to be successful in future ones. So this is one which we submitted in 2020, and it was led by myself in Ervia, and we built a consortium across a number of different EU countries and EU associated countries now as well, with Norway, Iceland and the UK involved in the project as well. And we engaged a specialist bid writer to assist us with it on a no-win, no-fee basis, which was an okay way to do it. I don't think we'd do it again that way, and I'll explain that in a moment. Now, our proposal got a very high mark, but unfortunately it wasn't, because just to reiterate, the standard is very, very high. The winning proposal got 15 out of 15. So it'd be very, very hard to get better than that. So in terms of the lessons learned that we've experienced, particularly over the last 2 years when I've been involved in it, and I suppose it builds on the points made by Tyndall earlier, that each project should start with a comprehensive partner search, and that is so important, and that should be done as early as possible. First of all, identify potential partners. That's an obvious one, but also try and build the best consortium possible and identify the potential opposition. And we found this to be very, very useful, because for the Realise project, it was actually an amalgamation of 2 different projects which were working on very similar things, and we realized that, well, we could just amalgamate both projects together, improving our own application, but also reducing the amount of competition as well for the call, which was resulted in a successful application. The second thing is in terms of proposal development. We found that having a funding writer adds significant value, and it also allows you to loop back in a little bit of point 1 here, that funding writers tend to be very well connected to other potential applicants, and they can give you a very good overview of who may be interested in this call that you may not have heard of before. We found that when we had a bid writer working for a fee, a base fee, that they were far more engaged in the process, as opposed to a no-win, no-fee proposal, where they weren't as engaged as they possibly could be and have been in other proposals. You have to be cruel to be kind with these applications. You have to have clear governance and a dedicated project manager, because each member has to bring value to the group. And we've been in situations where we've had to remove members from groups because, to be ruthless about it, they weren't pulling their weight and they weren't adding enough value to the overall application. Particularly we look at large infrastructure projects like we would, which may be a little bit different in the ICT. We've an awful lot of companies who just want to be involved in something and may not bring a lot of value. So that's why we have to be as streamlined as possible when writing the applications and making sure each member brings an adequate level of value to the group. Then in terms of project implementation, I suppose the big learning that we've had is around grant agreements, particularly where there's multi-partners involved, and they can take a significant time to finalise. Particularly if you're looking to do something new, where companies may not be overly au fait with the conditions involved with a EU grant agreement, or in our case where we're a semi-state company, where there's an awful lot of governance that has to be worked through and hurdles in order to finalise a grant agreement. And the second item that we're experiencing a lot now is that the project tasks need to have a very strong project management, and this is to avoid timeline slippage. And timeline slippage is just not acceptable within the EU funded programs, particularly in our CEF programs. There's very, very clear guidelines. If you don't hit your milestones with the correct information, you don't get funded for that element of work. So it's very important, particularly looking at when you're involved in projects where there's a large number of different work packages and work package members, that there needs to be very strong project management, and that needs to be embedded in the proposal development from the very, very start. There's a clear governance and a dedicated project manager. I suppose the reason why we've done this and funding, I suppose it links a little bit to what Tyndall said. You know, it's not a revenue funding, definitely not. But it is a fantastic opportunity to grow a business and to grow an idea within a business in particular. Particularly, we've got huge amount of benefit from being involved in the terms of the publicity, involved in projects, and also in terms of collaboration with other project members. And it's led to an awful lot of common work following on from that. For example, we've done a lot of joint dissemination events in the European Parliament based on connections we made through EU funding proposals and EU projects. So even projects which failed, it still allowed us to build a very strong relationship with the other members of the consortiums, which we've leveraged over time as part of dissemination in particular, doing stuff together when we've got a common message. The grant governance is very important. It can be quite cumbersome at times, but it does give a very strong structure to how else you may run projects within your business. So it's a very good experience to go through it and understand what a very strict governance looks like. And that governance then does lead to some very clear outcomes from projects. And once you've been through the process once, it is easier to get funding again in the future. From the point of view that funders, national funding in particular, like to see that you're getting funding for projects from elsewhere. A successful project endorsed by one funding organization makes it a lot easier for another funding organization to give you endorsement for their project as well. So that's a quick tour of what our lessons are from EU funding to date. Thank you very much.
Gerald, thank you very much. What an informative presentation, and certainly something that I can take from your presentation and from the presentation from Jörgus is, you know, proposals fail. It's a very competitive process, and you shouldn't be knocked down by that or defeated by it. There's a lot to be gained from it in terms of recycling proposals, or in terms of what you might have learned from it. Or even the networks you made and so on. And I think that's come through from yours in particular, and from Jörgus as well. So that gives people great heart. Don't be afraid, and don't be worried if things don't go to plan in terms of this highly competitive program. Thank you, Gerald. Now, our next speaker is Hilary Cronin, and Hilary is the Chief Innovation Officer at Metabolomic Diagnostics. This company has several projects from FP7 and Horizon 2020. Hilary is also an EU expert evaluator and has worked independently to help researchers write grants for Horizon 2020. Hilary, it's over to you. Hilary, you're on mute.
One sec. Okay, got it. Okay, can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, no problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to talk today. First of all, I just want to explain a little bit about metabolomic diagnostics. I guess I'm not sure that everybody in the audience would be familiar with us. Metabolomic Diagnostics, we're based in Cork, down on Little Island, and basically we're working to disrupt pregnancy care globally. It's startling to think that with all the technological advancements in the world, that pregnancy care, and particularly early pregnancy screening, hasn't changed dramatically for decades. So our ambition is to disrupt current pregnancy screening. And essentially what we want to do is develop a test that will be taken in early pregnancy, which essentially will profile the woman's risk of developing conditions later in pregnancy. So for example, going into the clinic at your early pregnancy visit in the first trimester, a blood sample is taken. We'll analyze it, and we'll be able to give the woman a profile to say your pregnancy is potentially at risk of, for example, preeclampsia or preterm birth. So then decisions can be made with the clinician as to what sort of interventions should take place. Fundamentally, our core technology is we're utilizing our expertise in clinical mass spectrometry and big data analytics to develop the test. We are a small SME, so we have 10 staff. We're pre-revenue, and to date we're in the region of €8 million invested in the business. That investment has come from a variety of different sources, the Irish government, private investors, obviously, of a large portion of it, and we have been quite successful in grant funding. I'm talking today, I suppose, particularly from the SME perspective in European funding. As Jenny said, I'm Chief Innovation Officer with Metabolomic Diagnostics, but I guess some parts of the presentation also have my perspective as an EU evaluator, because I have been involved in the evaluation process with the EU, so I understand that side of things, and as a grant writer. So Metabolomic Diagnostics, our European funding success, we have been successful in participating in consortium projects. As Jurgis and Gerald spoke about, we have been a participant SME in those projects. We had a project called Improved. There was 11 partners across Europe, which included 4 SMEs. The project ran for 5 years, and it did center around pregnancy risk screening, which was what we wanted. And it was a successful project that wrapped up just last year. We also benefited from the Marie Curie actions, which Steve mentioned earlier, particularly a Marie Curie individual fellowship, where we successfully got a PhD to join our company from Germany. Now, the Marie Curie, it has to be, mobility has to be involved, so the person has to come from another European country. Our first attempt at recruiting somebody, we identified the candidate, which is actually the hardest part, to find a candidate across Europe that is appropriate to come and work on a project in your business with the right expertise. So we identified the candidate, we submitted the application was successful, but unfortunately, due to the timelines involved in getting the application in and getting the result out, the candidate had already found a different job. So that was an unsuccessful attempt on our behalf. So the second time around, what we did was we had already recruited somebody who had already moved to Cork, and I can't remember exactly the timeline, but you have a specific amount of time. They can already be working for the business, but you can apply for the grant for them anyway. So the candidate, we had a very experienced mass spectrometrist. She was already joined us. She was already working with us in Little Island, and we applied for the grant for her for a project that we wanted to do. And that was successful. And the grant took 2 years and was 200K. It funded the salary and some of the R&D costs. And again, that was a very successful experience for us in terms of European funding. The most significant European funding, and I guess of interest to SMEs here, is that we were successful in getting what was called at the time the SME Instrument Phase 2. But today, it has now moved to be called the European Innovation Council Accelerator. So we were successful in getting 1.9 million in funding for that from Horizon 2020, which was a fantastic achievement and was hugely significant for metabolomic diagnostics. So in the SME instrument, just to give you some insight into that, basically what we got the funding for was a grant to develop our product towards market launch. Grant funding from Horizon Europe cannot be used for direct commercial activities. So you won't be grant funded for in the market activities. Everything will be towards the market. We got 1.9 million towards a 2.7 million euro project. So essentially that was 70% funding. But it's also important to note that it's 70% funding, but in addition to that, you get 25% overhead and direct costs. So that brings the level of funding up to, like, I think it's about 85% or something like that. The majority of our costs in the project were personnel costs. So it funded our team to do the work that we were doing anyway, which was excellent. It's not repayable, just to be clear, and ours was a 2-year project. It's important to understand the EU's motivation for offering this significant funding to SMEs is that they want to support innovation in Europe and jobs in Europe. I think that the purpose of it originally was when they looked at why innovation wasn't flourishing in Europe. They recognized that America was far better at supporting, early stage companies and innovators. So they're looking to mirror sort of activities in the US, and that's how this initiative came about. So like I said, we were funded under what was called the SME instrument. Now that is called the Eic Accelerator, which Steve mentioned earlier. So the Eic Accelerator is basically, its ambition is to support high risk, high opportunity innovation. So they're really looking at innovative ideas, innovative business models that are going to disrupt the markets. And obviously it has to have a European dimension in that they want the innovation to be based in Europe. They want to grow companies in Europe, jobs in Europe, make an impact in Europe in terms of society. But you can very clearly demonstrate that you have global ambition. And that's something that's important. Again, it's 70% grant funding for pre-market activities. But there's also, in the new Eic Accelerator, they're offering up to 15 million equity. And that is that they've recognized that they need to support innovative companies when they get into the market. They need to offer them some support as well. So it's a new departure for the EU to be offering equity. But that's what they're doing now, which is fantastic. So you could have a project where you need, for example, 2 million to get your product developed to the point where it's ready to go into the market. So you can apply for the 2 million for that. And then you can say, I have the vision and the planning that it's going to cost me, I don't know, 4 million to actually get traction in the market. And that 4 million could come from equity. The new Eic Accelerator is a 3-stage application. It used to be a 30-pager first off, but they've changed it now to try to make it easier, I guess, for people to apply in the first instance to a 5-page application, a 3-minute video, and a pitch deck. After that, there's a decision. You get a reply to say go, no go, I think within about 6 weeks. And then if you're invited to go ahead, then you must submit a 30-pager. The 30-pager then again is assessed, and again you get a go or no go decision. And if you go ahead, you are going ahead to an interview panel, and after that interview panel, a decision will be made. I think Steve referred to it earlier. Nothing is cast in stone yet, because the work programs are all still in draft stage. But this is more than likely the approach that is going to happen. And what's not clear is when the deadlines will be exactly. But if you do have ambition for this, I would say you should be thinking about your 5-pager and your 3-minute video and your pitch deck now. You need to start the process of it. It is very competitive. There's no getting away from that. You do have to have a really excellent, verifiable proposition. You have to convince them that what you have is amazing and fantastic, because it is very competitive. Now, when you see the positivity rates, you go, oh my God, the chances are very slim. However, there is still a lot of poor proposals going in. So if you have a decent proposal with a good proposition, I think your chances are higher. Just from the SME perspective in general, and I guess this goes across all the different types of funding, the consortium funding, and the individual funding, and the Marie Curie funding, the proposals. From an SME perspective, it simply has to be directly aligned with your business. You can, if you might say something, oh, that'd be nice, we could get funding for something like that. Don't do it, because it'll disrupt your business in all the wrong ways if you get funding for the wrong project. So as much as possible, you really need to, particularly in consortium projects, you really need to consider the proposition and say, is what I'm getting out of this consortium going to benefit me and my business? Is it going to directly add value? And if it's not, I would suggest that you seriously consider walking away from a proposition, and you have to be prepared to do that. And I think that is really important, no matter what euros are involved, if it's not appropriate for your business. So just when you go in with your eyes open and say, I want to achieve this out of this project for my business. The other thing is it takes commitment to write a proposal. You can get external consultants to support you, and there are very good consultants out there that will help. But fundamentally, you will need internal resources to work on it, because it's only your story. So you need to be able to commit resources to that. Writing the proposal itself means you learn an awful lot about your business proposition, because you are forced to ask yourself difficult questions and put them down on paper. So that can be a very, very valuable exercise in itself. And the other thing is, if you are successful, you do need to understand that there is commitment required to manage the project. But once you understand that up front, that, you know, you need to monitor your finances, you need to monitor your timesheets, you know, it's not so burdensome. It's only when people fail to monitor those from the start that all of a sudden they get to reporting and they go, oh my goodness, you know, how are we going to do this? But if you upfront, if you're successful, and if you lay out how you're going to manage the project, monitor the finances, it's fine. From an SME perspective, I suppose convincing proposal, and the typical headings in EU proposals and consortium proposals, it's different now for the Eic Accelerator because it's moved more towards a business plan. But in general, even for the Eic Accelerator, I suppose the mindset of the EU is that it has to have excellence, impact, and implementation. So from the SME perspective, the excellence is the intellectual property. What have you got that's unique? It's not just about patents. Everybody automatically goes patents for intellectual property. It's also about know-how and trade secrets. The important thing is that you can convince the evaluators that you have something innovative that you can protect. So that tomorrow, when someone else down the road comes up with another idea, that he can't just start up the business and they've given you all the money. So you need to have some level of intellectual property that you can protect. In terms of impact, the most important thing here is that you're going to make an impact. And in order to make an impact, you have to have a market that's willing to pay. Now, impact also obviously covers societal impact and changes to that are necessary in terms of the EU. But from an SME's perspective, to convince that you have a market that's willing to pay, somebody's going to give you value for what you're offering. And it's really important. And things here like letters of support from customers, potential customers, can be really significant. In terms of implementation, obviously you have to map out a plan, a project plan in terms of deliverables and milestones and all that. But what's really, really important is the team. So the team has to cover key skills that are necessary for, you know, for commercialization. And the EU is all about innovation now and delivering stuff to the market, even for consortium projects. That's becoming a big issue. So they really want to see that the team understands innovation and understands the complexities of delivering a product to the marketplace successfully. Like writing proposal takes effort and time, but I think, as Dorcas said earlier, you know, once you get started, you do repurpose content. So for an SME, it is a big task to get started. But once you get started in writing proposals and thinking along the lines of how can you get in non-diluted funding to support the projects running in your company, you can repurpose your content for other opportunities and, you know, get value out of it. In terms of tips for success, I suppose this is coming from the evaluator's perspective. You have to put your mindset in that of the evaluator. The evaluators know nothing about you. They know nothing about your project. So you have to remember that from their point of view, this is a blank canvas. Also, typically the evaluators have very little time. You know, they're not given a huge amount of time to evaluate the proposals. So it's very important that you understand that the first page can really win or lose it, you know. So if the first couple of pages, if your proposition isn't clear, then you're on a losing streak, because the evaluator is going, look, I have a pile of 30 of these here, you know, I'm going to move on. So answer the questions that you're asked in terms of the template and keep your sentences short, and use the resources available. Like Steve, I mean, the Enterprise Ireland national contact points are excellent in all of their fields. So I would really encourage you to engage with them. To be successful, I just want to point out that the scoring system in the EU goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But to be successful, you have to have either very good or excellent. Like someone mentioned earlier, the successful proposal was excellent. So they got 5 out of 5 in the 3 criteria: excellent, impact, and implementation. So you do have to have an excellent proposal. So in conclusion, it is a great opportunity, and SMEs are more and more sought after now in terms of consortium, because the Commission are pushing industry and academia together more and more, and particularly SMEs. So SMEs are really sought after for proposals. So, you know, it's a good time to be an SME in that regard. Like I said, it needs commitment. Innovation is key. You do have to be able to demonstrate that you're innovative. But it's a great opportunity to get valuable funding and connections. At the end of the day, you always have to remember, it's not just about the funding. This is about the success of your business. Yes, the finance is hugely significant, but the whole process will really support you in developing the business. And Metabolomic Diagnostics have been very lucky to benefit from European funding, and we will be applying for more European funding in Horizon Europe. My contact details are there if anybody does want to get in touch. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hilary. That was very informative. And I mean, in particular, your perspective and your tips on the Eic Accelerator program, although, you know, with the caveat that, you know, we have to wait for the formal announcement and details of that program, but just to get people started, even, you know, a 5-pager to get started on that is a great tip. And also what you were saying from your experience as an evaluator about that first page of the proposal, that you have to hit the evaluator hard with everything that's in your proposal. It has to be summarized. It has to capture their imagination, because otherwise they will move on. There's so little time. And I think that was a great message to get out to our participants today. Okay, our next presentation is from Ger Hallisey. Ger is Senior Manager in the Office of the Products and Operations CTO in Dell Technologies. He leads the Research Europe group, which includes teams in Ireland and Israel, and is responsible for the technical management of Dell Technologies' European-based collaborative research programs, which includes both EU and national funded projects, as well as managing strategic, academic and industrial partnerships. Ger, please tell us about your EU framework experience.
Happy to, Jenny. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Eic at Cork for the opportunity to address at this forum this morning. Okay, so as Jenny has introduced, I'm Ger from Dell Technologies. So Dell has a large presence in Ireland across its 3 sites in Cork, Limerick and Dublin. So I lead a research group with researchers based in Cork and Israel, and we're part of the Dell Technologies CTO office. I guess within the CTO office, our mission is to be the company's technical early warning system. And we see EU research programs as a means to achieve this. My team has been participating in EU projects since the end of 2013. Our first 3 projects were in FP7, so Solus, Specs and Sparks. And we've participated in 11 H2020 projects, 6 of which are still active. We've predominantly focused on ICT over that period, with a particular focus on privacy and security, next generation networks and 5G. And some of the use case verticals that we've prioritized include telco, manufacturing, healthcare, and intelligent connected vehicles. We participated in 1 Marie Curie research exchange program. So that was the Solus project, and we did that was coordinated by the TSSG team in WIT. Our latest project is an Excel funded project. So Excel is slightly different from the traditional RI or RIA projects that Stephen described earlier. So the funding is a co-funding model, which includes contributions from the European Commission. Because we're a multinational, we get a contribution from the IDA, but we also have to put some skin in the game ourselves for the Excel program. Because I guess the Excel programs aren't funded to the same levels as the RIAs and the IAs, they tend to be less competitive, and they can be a very good instrument for projects where you have a much stronger and maybe more immediate strategic relevance within your organization. So they're definitely worth keeping an eye on and exploring. So across all these projects, we've collaborated with over 160 partners, which includes 39 universities, about 80 industry partners, and some 18 research institutes. So research institutes. I guess Tyndall would be kind of an Irish version of a research institute, even though Tyndall from a Europe and EU point of view comes under UCC. But you're talking about the likes of Fraunhofer and CEA. They are the big research institutes in Europe. So definitely they are worth learning. It's worth learning more about them because they are huge beneficiaries, and they have huge insight into EU framework programs and huge connections. So they're worth it's worth getting to know people within those organizations. So I'll tell you a little bit of how we got started. We're relatively new to this game compared to some of the other multinationals in Ireland. So we got started around 2011, which was kind of before Dell acquired EMC. I guess we partnered at a local level initially and did some initial proposals with UCC and then WIT. And we also partnered from an industry point of view with United Technologies, which is now Raytheon. And I guess for us at this stage, going back it's 9-10 years ago now, the task was daunting, even for a big company like EMC at the time. So as you can see, there are a lot of funding instruments available at the EU level. FP7 was probably even more complex than Horizon 2020, and Horizon Europe now is probably less complex again. So I guess to help us navigate the maze, back then we engaged a lot with Stephen O'Reilly, who's spoken already this morning. And we also got some great insights and advice from the likes of the Intel team in Kildare. So I guess the advice there is to leverage the local network, the academic institutions in Ireland, the support from the government agencies, and also your peer industry colleagues. They're all willing to help and support. So, use that as much as possible. And so just getting onto some kind of perspectives and insights and I guess learnings that we've kind of picked up along the way. You got to kind of study the landscape, and the landscape has a couple of dimensions that you probably have figured out from the other presentations. So first of all, there's the funding programs. So there's different programs to suit different requirements. To the uninitiated, as I said, it can be daunting. So your NCP can be a great advisor and navigator, so use them as much as possible. Also, the landscape within Europe is vast. There's lots of universities, lots of research institutes, lots of industry partners out there. So my advice would be to start with someone maybe a local university or a local industry partner. Examine who is doing interesting work that aligns with your organization's competencies and strategic objectives. Diving into deep end, I think, is not advisable. Finding, there's lots of call opportunities. There's a lot of opportunity costs. It can be difficult. If you've got limited resources when you're getting started. The academic partners, they have a huge amount of experience here, so leverage them as much as possible at this stage. Also, within EU programs, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in whether a proposal will get funded or not, because I guess the competition is so fierce. So, you got to prepare yourself for some disappointment, and often it may take 1 or 2 resubmissions to get something over the line. I think, as Jorgis indicated, they had a national level proposal that didn't get funded, but it did get funded at an EU level. So, as he said, there's no such thing as a failed proposal. You've built up a lot of collateral, even from engaging in the process of submitting a proposal, and you can certainly get a huge reuse value out of those proposals. So I guess the advice there is don't even though you're disappointed, don't go and throw the idea in the bin. As I said, the competition can be very intense. Success rates in some of the calls is less than 5%. And generally, your NCP will have some insight into how competitive a call is going to be. So make sure to kind of reach out to them in advance to get a sense of how competitive a call might actually be. I guess the other thing is patience. It does take time. We did not have overnight success. I think our first proposal was submitted in 2011, and it was kind of March, April 2013 before we had a successful one. And then our first project started at the end of 2013. So I guess the important factor at this stage is kind of to learn, revisit proposals, understand what was reviewed favorably, where gaps existed. So this feedback loop is very important. Also, I think you learn an awful lot about different partners, you know, what are their strengths, you know, choose your partners carefully is very good advice, as Jorgis gave earlier. You know, who did you work well with, who didn't you work well with, who were the strong coordinators. So even going through this process where you may not be successful initially, you are gathering very useful information. Okay, the need to network has come up across all the presentations. Now, having a strong network, I think, is probably the most important single differentiator in being successful in winning funding. Also, it is important once you've established a network to maintain it. So, you know, taking a year out from submitting proposals can work against you. We kind of made that mistake in 2015, where we had a lot of success in 2014. So continuity of presence at the commission organized events or open days is kind of important to maintain your profile. I guess there are a number of approaches to building out a kind of a good network. As I've mentioned, there's attending the information days. That's a great opportunity to meet potential partners. Obviously, the face-to-face aspect is now impacted, but the virtual experience is not quite the same. However, with the kind of the virtual events and with them likely to be the norm for the foreseeable future, I guess the one advantage of the virtual event is that you can attend a lot more of them because you don't have to hop on a plane. Participating in industry associations like the BDVA or the ETB for HPC, they can also be a great opportunity to network and build your organization's profile in the EU research circle. So these research associations, they also have very tight relationships with the Commission. So, and one of their main function is to kind of define the strategic research agendas in different thematic areas. And it's these research agendas, they form the basis for the multi-year work programs. So it is also a great opportunity to influence where the Commission will invest its research budget. Also, you know, building partnerships with local universities, I said earlier, you can't underestimate that, so I'd highly recommend that. They already have some great international networks established, which you can tap into. So I guess the advice around the network is don't try to do it all yourself, you know, because it can be overwhelming. I guess the next key insight is to kind of have a plan and follow a process. So this is kind of very important at the proposal stage, that you stay focused on your objectives and what you want to get out of a project. Remember what you're signing up for. Be careful about where you choose to allocate your time. You know, a project, you know, will have maybe 9 or 10 work packages and could be very tempting to kind of, because a lot of the work packages will seem very interesting, to kind of spread your effort over maybe 5 or 6 work packages and 10 or 12 tasks. My message is avoid that. You know, don't spread yourself too thin. Focus on maybe two, maximum 3 work packages, even if the nature of the work is of the other work in the other work packages is interesting. If you dilute your contribution, your impact won't be as significant. Also, I guess the other thing is if you only allocate 2 months to a work package, you're going to inevitably spend 3 or 4 months in that work package, okay, because there's a certain overhead of just being a member of a work package. So if you're diluted too much, this can add up significantly over the lifetime of a project. Also, I guess the life cycle of your involvement in a proposal can be different. For some proposals, you may be involved very early, almost like a founding partner, and so your engagement may be over a 4 to 6 month period. So you can very effectively steer and shape the scope of that proposal. Other proposal opportunities, they may come late in the game. Okay, you may be very disciplined and say you're going to choose to ignore them, but sometimes, you know, the opportunity can be very relevant. So you just need to have a process for evaluating these kind of these late breaking proposals, and just, okay, you may say you're going to dismiss them and not look at them, but some of them may turn out to be good opportunities. So my advice there is just to have a process to evaluate those. Also, there are different roles that, say, a large organization can take on within a project. So within Dell, we kind of classify these roles as we can be a research provider, a technology provider, a platform provider, or a use case provider. So it's important that you clearly define what role you will fulfill within the project. So if you're going to do more than one, make sure you resource your efforts appropriately in the proposal. And another important point is, if you're going to be providing a platform to host other partners for pilots, don't underestimate the effort and complexity in doing this. System integration is a key role. It takes a lot of time, and it needs to be resourced appropriately. Also, if a project is going to require a platform or some infrastructure, make sure this is clearly specified in the proposal, and if it's you, make sure you budget for it. The next insight then is around using data. So Stephen mentioned earlier the kind of QLIC, I think is the name of it, the analytics engine. So this is a huge, this is an excellent source of information. And it's also got some very nice kind of customizable reporting views that kind of shows how the Horizon 2020 funding has been allocated over the 7 years. Who's won the funding and what calls, what topics, who their project partners are, what the EU contribution has been. So using this data and just spending time going through it, it can give you very useful insights on prospective partners for future call opportunities. Also, I guess, it's very important to kind of study the call text carefully, and also to look to kind of any advisory notes that may accompany calls that the Commission may publish. So again, the NCPs can be a great information source here. I guess one key thing, certainly for the projects that we participate in, they're collaborations. So, you've got multiple partners, you've got different opinions, you've got different cultures. So you need to be comfortable in this environment and kind of understand that you're going to have to compromise with other partners on decisions around requirements, architecture, implementation, and deployment. And they're all done by agreement and consensus. So inevitably, you're not always going to get what you want. And in an active project, building coalitions among partners is important to help, you achieve your goals by getting the appropriate support from others when needed. So there's a bit of politics there that you need to be comfortable with managing. And also remember that, how you behave in a consortium may potentially impact future opportunities that come your way. Communicate, okay, so this is really kind of communicating within your organization, especially if it's a large organization. So it's for a 3-year project, that can tend to get kind of lost in a large organization. So it's important that you communicate regularly within your organization. And it's within the EU projects, it's not like it takes 3 years to get any value from back to the business from an EU project. There's a continuous stream of deliverables produced every 3 to 4 months, with kind of some great leading edge insights. So, and the other important thing here is that even though these may not be your deliverables, they may come from other partners. There may be some great nuggets of insight there that may be relevant to other functions within your organization. So it's kind of very important to kind of review these deliverables thoroughly and, discipline yourself to kind of disseminate these to product groups and other CTO functions and other technology groups within your organization. I guess the key thing here is, that a lot of these deliverables come as kind of big 100-page documents. So, maybe take the time to kind of curate these documents into 2 or 3 page summaries that can be a useful serve as a useful appetizer to kind of key technology leaders within your organization. Because I guess, ultimately, the goal of the project is not just to complete the research tasks as defined in the original proposal and the statement of work. Ultimately, you want to be, that may be from the project's point of view, that's fine, but from your organization's point of view, your goal for doing the project was to kind of deliver some return and some value return to the business, okay? So the research value is not going to travel by itself to the business unit. It needs to be carefully packaged and broadcast, to have any chance of the value of the research being appreciated and potentially being adopted within the business down the line. Okay, so I guess to close out, like our experience with EU programs has been very positive. It certainly has kind of enabled us to explore new technology areas, 5G being one prominent example, where kind of 5 years ago, Dell wouldn't have been a significant player. And now in the last year, we've launched Telco BU, and there's an advanced research lab set up in Cork, which was primarily, decision to place that lab in Cork was heavily influenced by the capability in 5G built out by the research team through the SliceNet project. And that project only started in 2017 and only finished in July last year. So even in the first year of this project, we derived a huge amount of value to the business. So I hope this gives you some insights on what to expect and to look out for at both the proposal and the project stages. And happy to answer any questions when we get to the panel stage. Okay, that's me done.
Gerald, thank you very much. It was wonderful to hear the MNC perspective, and congratulations on your 5G lab. I mean, that's a significant achievement, and shows the value of an Irish MNC getting involved and bringing, you know, such intellectual property in terms of a lab setup back into Ireland. So congratulations. Folks, we've come to the end of our session. I'm not going to go through the question and answers in the platform. Please have a read of them. I'd like to draw your attention to one of the questions, which is around the prerequisite of having intellectual property and getting involved in the Eic Accelerator program, and just, you know, have a read of what was discussed there, but just say, you know, look, contact your Stephen O'Reilly and he'll be able to discuss this with you, just if you've any questions about that. So, and also Stephen has also reminded me that there will be a national launch of Horizon Europe on the 2nd of March. So watch out for that, a date for your diaries.
Sorry, Jenny, that's the 25th of March, sorry.
Oh, sorry, the 25th. Okay, the 25th of March. So watch out for that. And I'm sure, Stephen, you'll be advertising that far and wide. So finally, on behalf of IT at Cork, I'd like to thank all the speakers for their excellent presentations. They were so informative and interesting and gave us all a chance to assess this important opportunity coming up. I'd also like to thank you, the participants. And finally, if you would like further information, please follow up with Juliet Crowley or with Stephen O'Reilly, and they would be happy to help you or point you in the right direction for your query. The session is now closed. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.